All right, YouTube. So today's video we're actually making regarding the Sigma 300 to 600 f4 lens that was recently announced, and sort of what to expect. The title of the video is it's crippled out of the box. What does that really mean? And hang around till the end, and I think it will be kind of an eye-opener for some, because some people actually sort of kind of ignore this and then get into long-drawn discussions, be it on Fred and Miranda or other places, because they just didn't know or weren't aware. So what am I talking about? Whenever you put a third-party lens onto a Sony camera, there is something that Sony has done for many years, right? Which is, hate to use a word, but cripple the lens, which means you cannot get the full potential of your camera out of that lens, because it's not restricted. It's only reserved for most Sony lenses. Until recently, very few Sigma lenses were given the green light to actually truly maximize the speed of machines like this. This is the A9 II that's on here, the A9 III that's available, A1, and the A1 II. All of these cameras, they have the ability to shoot extremely high frame rates, and they're designed for, wildlife, sports, that kind of thing. So when you're buying fast lenses like this, especially f4 type of lenses, you need to be aware that if you own a Sony A1, for example, today, right, and or an A9 III, and you put that Sigma lens on it, the fastest that you can shoot it is 15 frames per second, unless Sony actually does a firmware update and unleashes that lens. Like I think they did that for one of their lenses, which was the 14 to 24, for the A9 III to go up to 120 frames per second. The lens is very capable of doing that. And the reason why I'm saying this to you is Sony has been doing this for a very long time, but they never catch any slack for it. Why? Because, their mount is open for third-party glass. Well, that's great, but I'm buying a third-party piece of glass where if I have a camera that's faster than, 15 frames per second, I will never be able to utilize the full potential of that camera and that lens combination. I have to buy a Sony lens. So if you look, you can get the Sony, the brand new Sony 400 to 800, even though it's an f9 lens, you can shoot 30 frames per second right out of the box, no problems. But with the Sigma, you can't. If you watch the interview done by the CEO of Sigma, I think Petapixel did it, watch it. And they were asked, just like, hey, if you could, what would you like to see Sigma actually develop, or something like that along those lines was the question. And the response that, the CEO actually provided was, I'd love to build a camera that can get the true potential out of this lens. That right there should be a big slap on Sony's face at this point. And honestly, Canon and Nikon, if you're listening, get to Sigma, get that lens, because I'll tell you this, all of the third-party lenses that are available for the RF system, I know Nikon also does some restrictions on what they can do with third-party stuff, but Canon RF mount, all of those cameras, they're not restricted. Those lenses that are made for it are not restricted by any means by the mount. It's the same as what an actual RF lens made by Canon gives. I think Tamron's making some, and then obviously the new Sigma ones that were made for it. So this might be a huge opportunity, Canon, for you to actually get hold of this lens and have it made for the RF mount, give it the 30, 40 frames per second, and unleash the fury, right? If Sony don't want to do it, it's a loss on their part. Honestly speaking, Sony has nothing like the 300 to 600. That's why they had Sigma make it. Or if you did that, most people that are going to spend that $6,000 probably have like a A9 II, A9 II, A9 III, or A1 II. Those types of cameras. They're not shooting that with, most of their other lineup, which is only stuck at 10 frames per second. Right? So if you are in that boat today and you own one of these cameras and you're buying that lens, you need to be aware right? You will not get 30 frames per second out of it. And if you do end up buying it and are frustrated, it is what it is. You might as well just buy a Sony lens. So maybe buy a used Sony lens, buy this guy. You can buy the 200 to 800 if you want. I'm sorry, the 200 to 600 and put a teleconverter on it. You'll still get 30 frames per second. All of that will work. But if you buy that new Sigma, which is an incredible lens, the 300, it's an f4. You know, you should be able to very easily use it, but nope, it's restricted. So Sony, if you're watching, unlock it because it's not cool. You know, some of these Sigma offerings are not cheap. They're expensive. When you're talking $5,000-$6,000, there should be no reason, nothing should hold that glass back from giving you the utmost in response, and dollar for dollar, you're getting the full value. What good is that third-party lens if it only gives you half the performance out of would you spend $6,000 on something if you knew that you could never get the true potential out of that lens? You wouldn't. I wouldn't. I mean, if you do, then that's really up to you. You can't blame anyone else for that. But you can buy a $2,900 new offering from Sony, which is the 400 to 800, and guess what? You can do the 30 frames per second right out of the box, no problem whatsoever. So, you know, you let me know your thoughts down below on what it is, but honestly, this has been bothering me for a very long time. We hold other brands accountable because they don't open the mount. It's almost better that they don't open the mount rather than cripple every lens that comes out, especially if you're using it in a professional environment. And if you have some of the higher end, you know, cameras, which can actually do the speed. So if you have one of those, you want to think twice about third-party lenses for that, especially on the Sony system, because you're not getting the full potential of your camera and that lens that you're buying, that whole combination, the best output possible. But if you buy a Sony lens and you use their body, no problem. Have had it. It'll give you every single thing, you know, nothing at all is restricted. So this is a very conscious decision that Sony's made. They did the same thing when the MetaBones adapter, you know, was also first introduced. But it is what it is. You know, they're trying to protect it because they want you to buy Sony glass. And that's not a bad thing. That's the same thing Canon and Nikon are doing too. They just have different approaches. So this whole third-party nonsense, I don't want to hear it. Oh, Sony has so much glass. That's great. Well, I use professional Sony bodies. Here, I signed up, obviously qualified to be part of the Sony no pro support. They don't support a damn thing. Try getting a camera from them. You'll never get it. It's always out at a football game because they only have 3 to lend out anyway to try it. I mean, I called Canon within 3 to 4 days. It's at my doorstep. It's crazy. So anyway, you know, when you're using this caliber of gear, right? I expect to get 100% out of that gear. If you think about it this way, if you bought a 600 f4 lens from Sony, which is $14,000, and I told you before you went home, all you can get out of that lens is only half of the actual frame rate that you could get if you got this other one for $16,000. You'd kind of be pissed because that's a lot of money that you're spending and you cannot get the most out of it because it's actually crippled by firmware. So Sony, unleash it. Let Sigma truly do what you wanted them to do, why you actually even asked them to make a lens for you and to begin with on your system. They've served you well. They've served a lot of people well. But the problem is that a lot of people are not aware. They're thinking that they're getting the full potential out of their professional Sony bodies when they're not. You're really not. And then others will argue, I only shoot 10 frames per second. So what? You have a machine that is capable of doing 20 or 30. You can't do that, even if you shoot 10. Why would you buy that piece of glass? I would rather just buy a Sony lens. All right? So, again, choices are good, options are good. But they have to make sense for every dollar you spend. And as much as you pay for these pro bodies, there should be nothing holding back the performance of that camera. And if there is a native mount Sony lens made for that mount, there should be nothing stopping that lens from producing every single feature to its fullest out of these cameras. That's my point. So let me know your thoughts. You might disagree. Honestly, I stand pretty firm on this one. This is one of the main reasons why I don't buy a lot of third-party things. But nonetheless, it is what it is. The bitter truth is there. This one shoots 20 frames per second. It's not a problem. Nothing is... Why? Because it actually says Sony on it. All over it. No problem. It's not crippled. So if you buy that Sigma and you find yourself in a pickle and it's not doing, you know, just hitting the mark for you, you might want to consider looking at the Sony 400 to 800. That might do you well. But again, you'll probably lose quite a lot of light that the lens can pull in, because now you're sitting at f8, f9, somewhere in that range. f8, sorry, is where you are in that range. So 6.3 to f8 at 600 or 800. Sorry, that's 800. Yeah. So I'm getting them all jumped up because it's got so many of them. Anyway, so with that, like, subscribe, be nice to each other, go out there, create your magic. And I am working on getting the Canon 200 to 800. No, it's not crippled. Exactly. Yeah. We're going to shoot full frame. All of them. Full frame meaning all the frames that the camera can do. If we can do 30, great. If we can do 40, great. It'll shoot it. No problems. Coming soon, but I wanted to make this because I do shoot the Sony system, and I do want you guys to be aware. If you're ordering that Sigma and you get it, and you're not getting the frame rate out of it that you thought you were, now you know why. So, you know, hopefully that works out for you, but just wanted to give you guys that heads up. With that, like, subscribe, be nice to each other, go out there, create your magic, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Thank you.